Hello, and welcome to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. I recently did a park chat on unconditional love, and I wanted to give it a bit more depth and a bit more detail. And so today I'm putting together a podcast episode on unconditional love. And I think traditionally a lot of people see unconditional love as something that's external, something that they give to others or something that they receive from others. But I wanted to challenge that notion and bring us back to that feeling of unconditional love that we can have within ourselves, because I think that has been lost a lot in the way that we have our social programming, right? From the movies that we watch, from our family environments, from the social context in schools and things like that. And all of the elements around us that help shape us into who we are, that have us looking a little bit more externally for the validation rather than remembering how we are unconditionally loved. Like, and when we do tend to start remembering that, or start looking for that because we have some sense within us that it exists, we start putting that onto external places. And for me, I know personally in my relationships that I've had, I think that my desire to show conditional love to the people I was in relationships with, regardless of what type of relationship, it could be workplace, friendships, family, even romantic relationships, that my desire to show that unconditional love to others actually impeded on my own ability to show unconditional love to myself. And it was a comment that I saw on a socials post. So the socials post that I saw was a lady on there, a woman on there, that was actually listing out some stuff that her partner had done and asking for advice. And there was a whole heap of advice in there from people saying, you already know what you need to do, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But one of them that I found was really helpful was written in a really nice way that was supporting her, but also saying, hey, maybe you should consider doing some more therapy or some more healing, because what you're demonstrating here is a lack of love for yourself and the inability to see these flags as they're being raised and discount them, or justify them in some particular way. And that really resonated with me. And one of the things I have tried to do is look at, consistently the relationships I've had haven't worked, and they've usually ended in around the same sort of way. The same sort of things have happened. And so I was looking at, yes, obviously I'm the common denominator, but I think these were other people's choices that led us to where we were when the relationships ended. So it was me looking at that and going, okay, well, if I don't want to do this again, what is something that I'm bringing to the table that's attracting these kind of people in? Right. So the people that do feel it's okay to behave in these ways, I'm obviously attracting them. And when you look back in hindsight, you can see all of the indicators that it was going to happen, right? But for some reason, we tend to not see them, discount them, justify them, all the rest of it. And so when I looked at that, I looked at possibly the fact that I looked past different things, and I would put more weight on what people were telling me rather than what they were showing me. And also, there were some circumstances where there were some things that happened and the unconditional love card was pulled. Oh, well, if you loved me, you would support me through this, or you would try and understand, those sorts of things. And it wasn't until I've actually had this opportunity to go through this deep self healing process and come from a place where I think at the moment is now, right here and now, I have the deepest amount of love for myself than I ever have, that I remember. Maybe when I was first born as a baby, I maybe had it, but when I look back over my life, I don't think I actually ever truly loved myself. There were times where I felt there was something wrong with me. There were times where I felt that other people's behaviors and their choices were a reflection on me. There was a time where other people's emotions, I felt like that was up to me as well to try and manage and minimize and help, without actually having that understanding that the only thing I can control is how I think, how I feel, and how I behave. And that is the same for everyone around me. They're responsible for the way that they think, the way they feel, and the way they behave. And I probably stayed longer in relationships than I should have, purely because I was justifying things. Now, from the outside looking in, it's easy to see these things, right? And I often look back as well when people would say things to me and I would justify, or I would come in defense of my partner or some of the things that were happening and defend that because of the unconditional love aspect. And so when we're looking to give external love to people, it should be conditional, right? Because if we truly love ourselves, then we have a standard of how we would expect people to treat us, how we would expect people to interact with us in the way that it makes us feel, how we expect people to show up in regards to alignment with values and belief systems. And when we are slowly eroding away those things and making account, like it being making, I can't think of the word right now, accommodations, yeah, for the other the things that are happening from other people. When we accommodate that, we are slowly eroding away our own standards, which then erodes away our own self-love. And so that's where we become into a space where we probably are believing more the words that they're saying or hoping to, instead of the behaviors they're showing. We also create a story in our head, right, around who this person is, of when they do show up. And so when their behaviors may not completely align with that and they tell us something that does align with that, it's quite easy for us to grab that and go, okay, well, what they're saying must be the real thing because that's the story I've created and that lines up for me, that they are honest, trustworthy, they do love me, etc., etc. And so we grip onto the perception of the person that we've created and we fall in love with that, right? We fall in love with that person that we think they are, that we believe they are, that we hope sometimes that they are. And so that's what keeps us in that space of thinking that they'll change, hoping that they'll change, helping them to try and change, or even just discounting some of the behaviors that really should be red flags to us, at minimum an orange flag, to go, hey, this might not be in alignment with me. So I facilitate past life regression sessions, as you may well know if you've listened to a few of my podcasts. And one of the elements within that is helping people get themselves into an in between life space. And so, because we have many lives, in between the lives, we go into this space where we're chatting with our divine counsel, is what I refer to them as, getting wisdom, getting knowledge, setting up what we want to learn in the next lifetime that we're going into, what we're going to take in, what's going to be new, and different relationships we're going to have, different experiences we want to have. And we set that all up before we come. I'll do a full podcast on that. But at that point in that space is when we experience that unconditional love, right? Because when we're not in this human form, everything is a version of love. And so when we get to be in that space and my clients are in there and they experience the unconditional love, I tend to have the benefit of sometimes feeling it from them because I feel energy. I can feel that energy coming from them. And I've had clients cry in that space. The first one that cried, I actually got a bit worried and I was like, oh, are you okay? Is something going wrong? And she goes, oh no, I just have never felt this amount of love before. And it brought tears to her eyes to feel that worthiness, right? Because with unconditional love and loving ourselves unconditionally also comes with that being worthy. So being worthy of a relationship that gives me XYZ, being worthy of being treated in ABC way, being worthy of feeling like this when I'm around someone. And so, yeah, that element of being in the in-between life space, I think also has helped me come to this theory that the main element of self-love and unconditional love should be shown to ourselves. And when we don't do that and there's a misalignment, then our acceptance of things that we probably wouldn't normally accept becomes higher, and we do that a lot more. And so when we're looking at love for others, realistically, that should be conditional, right? It should be conditional upon things. Now, that doesn't mean that your relationship is going to be perfect and that everything is going to be exactly aligned the way it needs to be. It means that there may be conversations that you're having with the other person. It means that you may be raising issues. It means that you may be going to therapy together, or one of you may choose to go to therapy. But when we look at that, we need to understand, I suppose, from my perspective of what I learnt to understand, that the expectations I have of what I feel I deserve in the way of being treated, in the way of the belief system alignment and the values alignment, shows that the love is not conditional. So before, to make the love unconditional, I've pushed all that aside, right? And so I've actually loved other people more than I've loved myself. And that got me into some situations that were completely heartbreaking, right? I had to learn the hard way, like many of us. And so some of the conditions may be if, maybe some of their behaviors, maybe they've got some addictions that don't align with you. It's okay to say, hey, is there a way that we can work around this? Are you prepared to do something about this? Is this something that you are willing to give up or shift or learn or grow from? And if the answer is no, it's okay to walk away, right? When we're in relationships with people, if some of the ways that they treat you, if they call you names and that doesn't align with you, and in arguments, if you're fighting and they're yelling and screaming and abusing you at that same time, it's okay to sit down afterwards and say, hey, the way that played out, that doesn't align with me. How do we move from here? How do we go into a place where we can shift that? And if that behavior continues repeating, loving yourself means that you put yourself in a position and go, hey, I'm actually not going to deal with that. Now, this is very simple in the way that it sounds. However, relationships can be complex. And I know in my case, those things over time eroded away for me. They eroded my self-love and my self-assurance over time. And so when the stuff that I would say the worst stuff happened, I was already in a position where I wasn't as strong in my convictions and I didn't have as much strength as I would have at the start of the relationship. That's by design, okay, by the people that perpetrate this. So this isn't something that you can go, oh, why aren't I doing something different? Why aren't I leaving? Or I can't leave now because of all of this other stuff. I get it. It's complex, right? Not saying that you need to just up and go when there's elements of danger around doing that. But what it does mean is early in the piece, being able to identify these things and having enough self-love to be able to come forward and go, hey, I actually have my own self-worth and this isn't what I want a relationship to be for me. But in looking at that, I know that when I went into my past relationships, I wasn't the version of Gnomes that you see or hear before you right now. And so I have done a lot of healing. I mean, before I started my psychology degree, I actually went to a psychotherapist for about 3 years, and 5 on and off, but 3 consistent and then breaks in between, because I wanted to be in a healed position before I worked with clients, because I see so many therapists healing through their clients. I didn't want to do that. And so that was kind of the start of me having different realizations about what I was tolerating and why I was tolerating it, right? And then when I went in and did my psychology degree, again, a lot of education around those theories and the research and the studies that have been done on particular things around people's behavior that then created awareness within me to go, oh, okay, well, that's why I probably did that. And that's why I probably did this. And then the kicker, I think, for me was the RTT training with around subconscious programming. And it was kind of like a bit more of a light bulb moment when, and I think that is when my marriage started to really end, or the start of the ending, maybe is the best way to say it, because there would be things where I would now start standing up for myself and questioning things and calling out things in the best way I found possible, which then created a bit more of a divide in the relationship. And I started finding within myself a strength of going, hey, this is not what I feel a relationship should look like. It should be more loving, it should be more supportive, it should have all of these things in it. I mean, for me, my relationships, both of them had very, very high highs, like mint highs, like it was feeling like I've never felt before, the euphoria, but they had really, really low lows. Now that in itself should have been an identifier for me to go, hey, this isn't normal. The inconsistencies here isn't that's more of a toxic relationship, right? And that's possibly from me looking at that, a little bit of trauma bonding, right? In the sense of, okay, even though it wasn't right, it was probably familiar to me from what I'd seen previously throughout my lifetime. And so understanding that now sets me up in a different position if I was to go back into dating, that if I am dating someone, I would be able to see these things a lot clearer. The inconsistencies between how people show up and what they say is another huge element. The support elements as well. You know, when you're unwell, how does your partner support you? Do they seem frustrated they have to do things for you, or are they willing to come and help you out? If there's periods of when you are super busy, are things falling apart because they're relying on you to be their emotional regulation, and because you're already consumed in another area and can't be that because you're not the rock, then it's creating a whole lot of instability, which is creating more work for you. You know, all those sorts of things come through. But when we're looking at our own element of having unconditional love for ourselves as well, that doesn't mean that we put ourselves in a bubble and think we're perfect, because no one is, right? That's what we're here to do in the human form. When we're in the human form, there is not perfection, right? It's always learning, always growing, always experiencing, and pretty much always healing, unless you're choosing to be stuck in a place. That's your life, your rules. But we're not perfect. And so being in a place of unconditional love also comes with that element of brutal self honesty, right? It's about looking at the things that you've done, the behaviors that you have, the feelings that you have, and the thoughts that you have, and understanding that sometimes they aren't ideal. And having that brutal self honesty of going, oh, that really wasn't cool. Okay, now I'm going to explore, put the curiosity hat on and go and explore on, why did I do that? What was the motivator behind that? What was I trying to achieve? Was that for validation? Was that because I felt cornered and I felt fear? Like, where did that come from? And then once we understand where it came from, then we can start working on building the area around that and establishing more love for ourselves in the space of having more enoughness. Because if I'm being honest and very open with you right now, every time I'm triggered by something in particular around me, it's because it is highlighting within me my feelings of inadequacy or not enough. Right? And the more I come into this space of loving myself unconditionally, the more self worth I have. And I'm able to then sit in that now straight away. If something comes at me, I go, oh, that triggered not enoughness. Why do I feel like I'm not enough in that space? And then I go in and I start diving in and having a look. Now, although there is an element requiring of that brutal self honesty to be able to pick up the things that we could do better or that we have done that aren't real cool, there's also this line that we can't cross where we end up being really overcritical of ourselves, right? And falling into the space of the negative self-talk and all of that, and the shame and the guilt and everything. So it's okay to feel that while we're identifying why we've done something. But when we've done that, the step then is to, how do we move forward? Being stuck in that place where you're degrading yourself all the time isn't self-love, right? That isn't helping yourself progress forward. Now, some people that may feel they aren't worthy of great things will fall into that place, right? Because they're feeling like, well, I'm not worthy of being good. I'm not worthy of receiving love. I'm not worthy of getting X, Y, and Z. So I'm just going to degrade myself because that's all I'm worthy of receiving. I'm not a good person. I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. And, you know, I was even dating someone in the early days that actually did say to me that they weren't good enough for me. And the person that I saw them as was definitely more than good enough. I mean, I don't think that anyone's not good enough for me at all. I don't think that anyone is above anyone else in this life. We have different belief systems and different values and different things that align. Maybe we weren't in alignment, but I didn't see the misalignment at the time either, because everything seemed to be going so well. And the misalignment came from where we both saw ourselves. So the way I viewed myself obviously comes out in the way that I show up and the things that I do and the risks that I take. Whereas the way that he was showing up came out in the way that he was, you know, going and behaving, the things that he did. And early in a relationship, it's easy to mask, right, in those spaces. But when the relationship started to look like it was going to become something that was semi-serious, that was when the realization came in from his perspective that he didn't feel like he could meet my expectations. And kudos to him for saying that. Like, I'll give him some credit. However, also feel for him, because for someone to feel like they're not worthy for another human being is really quite sad, right? Because we should all feel that we're worthy of all the great things in this life. And the only reason we don't feel that is if we don't have the unconditional love for ourselves. Because with that, we know that we're worthy. We just might realize that we're not in alignment. So it kind of, yeah, flipped it on its head for me when I saw that comment about needing the extra therapy. And I thought about that, and it really was an aha moment for me of going, that's why I was choosing relationships or attracting relationships and people into those relationships that weren't serving me at the highest level, that weren't serving me to become a better version of myself. Well, they probably did with that, but in a really harsh way, right? Because everything helps you do that if you're on a learning journey. But they weren't conducive to me being at my highest level in the relationship at all times. And I think that is what I would be expecting moving into another relationship. Now, I understand it's not going to be rainbows and unicorns all the time. And there's going to be times where we have to have discussions and those sorts of things about stuff. But one of the things that was embedded in me when I was younger was relationships are about sacrifices. And I think now where I'm sitting, I won't be going into a relationship that requires a sacrifice at all. Because if I have to sacrifice who I am, what I believe, and what I feel like I deserve, then that's not a sacrifice in the sense of what I want to take, because that's just eroding away who I am and my self love. And I didn't have the strength beforehand to do that. I felt like the sacrifice thing was what needed to be done. And I suppose that also gets to a point where you get a bit jaded if you're the one making all the sacrifices and there's no sacrifices coming back, right? In that space. So when you really sit in yourself, the question is, if I think about the thought of unconditional love, am I looking for that or even projecting that externally? Am I putting up with behaviors and things in some of my relationships that I probably should be having discussions with people about? Does it, when I go to have contact with someone, does that excite me, or does that make me feel sad, or does that make me feel fearful of having those interactions? Because if you're not excited about spending time with someone, if then that's something that we can look at internally as well and understand, why is that? Why? Because it's obviously not in alignment, because whenever we're in alignment with something, that is meant to excite us. And part of being here, what we are here to learn, is to follow the path of our most excitement, of our highest level of excitement, rather, right? That's the whole concept. The whole concept of coming here is to learn the things we need to learn to be able to grow as a spiritual being, have experiences that we can then decipher and then become part of our wisdom bucket that we can pull from, and have the ability to raise our vibration as high as we can so that we can actually connect with that higher version of ourselves. And the ability to raise our vibration comes from following the things that bring us our highest level of excitement. And then when we're at that high vibration, that is when everything around us just falls into alignment. Things that aren't meant to be there are going to fall, or they're going to be repelled. The things that are meant to be there are going to come in and be attracted to you. And it goes into that space of saying, if something's meant for you, you can't outrun it. You can't run fast enough to outrun it. It will find you, because the things that are meant to come to us will come to us at the timing. And if you want them to come to you now, then raise that level of excitement. But yeah, just an interesting piece I thought I'd share with you, because I think we get caught up in, the Disney movies, the happily ever afters, the constructs of relationships that have been established over time that, in the more traditional sense, maybe some misogynistic thoughts in there, definitely patriarchal thoughts, social systems as well, that all come in that have us in a place where we feel like we're here to, or when we're in a relationship, we have to put the other person's needs before our own. Now, there can be compromises, but not sacrifices, right? And a compromise isn't something that actually has you giving up something that is really meaningful to you. A compromise is sitting there and going, well, how can we both show up at our best level to be able to be in the best place for each other? How can we both come into a place where we are eluding our own unconditional love for us that then supports how we're moving forward together? Anyway, hope that's added some value to you. I look forward to serving you again in our next episode.